Welcome, everyone, to our first book club episode.
This is Book Dragon Banter podcast.
Yeah.
Welcome back, listeners. We're so glad you're here.
Today, we are going to be talking about this book, The Last Dragon of the East by Katrina Kwan. It is her debut novel, and it's a lovely fantasy romance adventure.
Katrina Kwan is a Vancouver-based fantasy and contemporary romance author. With 6 years of experience as a romance ghostwriter, she's very excited to finally be writing stories under her own name. Her books have been translated in up to 5 languages. And guys, when I was reading, I went through a couple of the articles and interviews that she's done, and she's got an estimated 150 ghostwritten books under her belt.
Wow. That's a lot of books to write in 6 or 7 years.
One of her articles, there's an interview in there talking about the process and the turnaround for those books where she has to write, it's like 20,000 words a week and to keep up with the deadlines. And total side digression, but I'm really curious now with generative AI, has that decimated the ghostwriting industry? Sorry, tangent thought for a future discussion. But that was just something that I found really interesting when I was doing my homework. If someone wants to know what she's working on and what's coming up next, she's got a new story that's like a 9-tailed fox going to the 9 hells and escaping with the bounty hunter who sent her there is the plot of the next story that she's working on. So I'm really excited for that because I enjoyed this one enough to be excited for whatever she writes next. All right. Spoiler-free recommendations. I really enjoyed this. I would recommend it. Not necessarily for the cozy fantasy crowd. I know it gives, in the marketing for it, definitely made it sound like it was going to be cozier than it turned out to be. But inside this, there is an author's note that The Last Dragon of the East is a fantasy intended for adult readers. While it is a hopeful tale of love and devotion, the journey on which our characters will embark is one steeped in war, violence, and death. Readers who may be sensitive to more mature themes of self-harm, suicidal thought, and torture are encouraged to take heed. And now set forth and find your fated one. But that author's note was not in the audiobook because I did a tandem read. I listened and read so I could tab and find stuff. But the audiobook did not have that warning. So I was glad to see it in here because there's some darker stuff in this that I was not expecting.
I totally missed that author's note. Which is why I was going to say that it was more violent than I had expected.
I would say, if you like Legends and Lattes from Travis Baldree, that is lighter and cozier than this is. This is not the same vibe as that.
Yeah. Legends and Lattes is a lot more humor-based than this one was. This a little bit more realistic intensity for the situation in which the characters find themselves. Although the author is very light touch with it. They don't go super deep into these things, but it's absolutely there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So at this point, spoilers, after this, there will be details. I have all the tabs for the details and the quotes. So if you are interested in reading the book yourself before we get into those details, go read the book, and then you can come back and hear us dissect this. I will be dissecting it.
I recommend the book very, very much. So no matter what your opinions are, it's definitely worth a chat.
I also really enjoyed it. I traditionally like deeper fantasy. I like vast world building, and this was a little on the lighter side of it. So while it's not cozy fantasy, I would say that it's a lighter take than it could have been, which is why I was surprised by how much kind of violence adventure there was in it. It doesn't get super gruesome. But for me, it was like a fun, fast read. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the world building. I could have used more world building. I really wish that there was a map at the beginning of the book because she talked about, well, because I love maps, but also she talked about going to the east or going to the north. And I really wanted to see that laid out on a map. But I thought a lot of the ways that she wove some of the Chinese mythologies in with her own take on the story was really lovely. And that was one of the things I enjoyed about it the most.
All of the little mythology tales that were put in, it reminded me a lot of reading Watership Down. That had all of these lore, from rabbits So very different characters that you're getting that from. But that's another one of my favorite things, is just having those lore stories that talk about the beginning of things, like how the stars got in the sky, how rivers were made in the land, like the creation myths that different cultures have. I find them fascinating. And so it was really lovely to have some of those stories embedded in here. And I did read, I forget which story it was in particular, but one of them specifically, she talked about being a story that her grandparents would have talked about and told. And so that was part of the choice to include it.
That's cool.
Yeah. And that this book in particular was part of her as an author, as a writer, as a person, getting in touch with her heritage, is learning about that myth, learning more about her heritage. And I think that's lovely when an author gets to pursue that and share it from their perspective. For the authors that they're, first generation, second generation, they're still so close to that heritage and they were raised on the stories and things like that. I love getting to read their books that include those perspectives.
Absolutely. And to put their own take on it, right? Because it's like a modern, even though the book doesn't take place in modern times, it takes place in a ancient time that's not specified because it's fantasy time. But it does have like a little bit of a modern flavor to it, I thought, with the way that the characters interacted with each other and talked about some of the stuff. It didn't feel super ancient, but it had all of these kind of old elements brought in.
Yeah, and they did bring in some things like the way that things were named or some words that were particular to the language or culture.
So one of the ones that kept throwing me in this is that our main character, who we haven't even talked about yet, Sai, he keeps referring to the love interest as my lady. And that is lovely, but that is definitely a historical, because you can't call someone, she's closer than a miss, but she's not a missus, and she's not a princess. What do you call them? So going with my lady, I thought was appropriate for the historical context, but also as a modern woman, it was a little jarring. Just to me, that was personal opinion on that one. Versus anytime, so our main character, Sai, uses endearments that are my dumpling, my sunshine.
Mooncake.
Which annoys the heck out of our, mooncake. Annoys the heck out of our leading lady. I loved those. I wanted more of those scattered out, annoying her.
Yeah,
more
I preferred that. I preferred that to my lady also. But also, the formality of the time meant that he didn't have permission to call her by her first name at that point. The spaded couple that had known each other, or he didn't remember, but she knew, but she hadn't given him permission yet. She was kind of trying to keep him at a distance, I think. So she wasn't like, yeah, call me by my name, right? So my lady is just fine with me. Thank you very much. You can be at a distance.
Yeah.
She probably would have been preferred to be called by her first name than Mooncake, although I did love that one so much.
Mooncake, Sunshine, everything. I did like Sunshine a lot, but I'm not a very sunshine kind of personality, so I don't love nicknames myself, generally speaking. So I thought that the balance was really good and really cute. It didn't get to the point where it irritated me. But I did wonder, why didn't Katrina choose to use a more culturally term?
It's interesting.
Well, so this is something that I appreciate as a choice that she made, because even talking about this, like our main characters, we have Jin, we have Sai, we have Fang, we have Emperor Rong, which that one only has a slight like extra sounds that I have to make to try and pronounce it correctly, the way, or at least pronounce it the way that I heard it in the audiobook. There were only a couple of other places where it was the Chinese words that would, as a reader, without an audiobook to tell me how to pronounce it, I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't necessarily know how to get it right. So I appreciated the choice in giving us names that were simple, but still contextually correct, as far as I can tell.
I wanted a little bit more of the Chinese names, but I agree that if you're not listening to the audiobook, you're not necessarily going to feel like you're hearing them in your head pronounced correctly as you're reading. And I already said I love maps. I also love like a list of characters with name pronunciation. So if there had been more of that, then I think maybe having at the back of the book or the beginning of the book a list of names with pronunciations would have been helpful. The names were simple enough that it felt like I could understand, because I read the book, I didn't listen to the audiobook. I felt like I could pretty much know how they would sound, so I felt like I was saying them correctly in my head, except for the son's name, which I don't know how to pronounce, and I was curious about that one.
I gotta go back in the book. Hold on, I want to look at how it's spelled, because how it was spelled in the book and then hearing it on the audiobook, they weren't a perfect sync.
Wait, how is it spelled then? Because I only did the audiobook. So we've got Sage who only read, I who only listened, and then Zinzi, you chose to do both at the same time.
Yeah. Yep. It let me really go deep, really focus, really pay attention to, H-E-N.
Oh, yeah.
It might be H-E-N.
Yes.
Because it's A-Q-I-A-N.
Yep. That sounds right,
and that's
from the
A
audio.
with the little symbol. Yeah.
H-E-N.
H-E-N.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And that was the one where I was like, I know that this is not how I'm saying it in my head is probably not how the author would pronounce it. And so it's great.
I like very sweet and very unassuming of a name. It really fit the character that they developed.
We've talked a bit about culture, world building, how that was set. Like, this was a really approachable world build. It didn't feel epic or high fantasy, but it wasn't low fantasy. It felt easy to step into and enjoy without getting, because like some books, if I look at them and I open it and on the first page there's a map and there's a family tree and there's a pronunciation guide, like if I'm not doing an audiobook, that would scare me off, because that's
my love language. So.
That's your candy. Sage is like, give me those books. And I'm like, which is how you get a breadth of perspectives from us.
I like both.
Yeah. I mean, they're wonderful to have. I know, just looking at that, I'm going to go find the audiobook to listen to it, because it will be difficult for me to just read.
Enough.
And when I'm ready to start a book like that, I'm always like, okay, deep breath. I have to focus. I can't just pick it up and start reading late at night when I'm tired. I really have to spend the initial investment in time and energy to get into that heavy of a world build. Whereas you're right, this one was like so light and easy to jump into. And I thought she did a really nice job as the character travels. They start in his town, and then she describes his home and the town really sweetly. And then as he moves through, there's enough of a description of the land he's traveling through, but it was a lot more about like what was happening to him and the relationships he was having with the people he was traveling with, so that you didn't need to know, like, it wasn't Tolkien where you describe a mountain for 6 years.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, we're traveling through the mountains, and maybe there's talk of it being colder or needing, you
need your coats because it's cold weather.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it was easy to be like, oh, okay, I can kind of see that in my head. Or then you're in the jungle, and I can imagine what a jungle looks like, right? I understand that. And so a lot of detail wasn't needed, but she did a really good job describing the monsters. So when you would encounter one of the monsters, that was described in great detail. And I really got a feeling for it. Whereas I felt like some of the like land areas, it was a little bit more left open to the reader just to fill in some of the blanks. And I thought that worked really lovely.
Yeah, that was awesome. I really loved the balance that Katrina had with the world build here, because for me, it felt very atmospheric. So instead of being descriptive, I could feel it and sense it a little bit more through the way that she chose to insert the reader into the story, as opposed to like giving us all the tools to see every little detail of the scene going on around us. She just gave us a vibe, a feeling, except for, like you said, Sage, those moments of intensity in which there was more description in order to create tension in the reader. And I thought it was genius. I thought it was really well done. That's the kind of atmosphere is so hard to achieve unless someone just is born to it with that very special talent that they just have, and fantastic for them. But for a writer, it's really hard to achieve in the earlier stages for most of us. It has to come as we go along with our style. And some of us never achieve it because we don't want it. There are authors who much prefer the descriptive. And for example, the Lord of the Rings, since we were just talking about that, He always leaned on description more than atmosphere. And the description did create an atmosphere, don't get me wrong, but it was detail oriented as opposed to Katrina. It was vibe, atmosphere, feeling. And that lent a little bit to me the cozier atmosphere. I didn't have to work hard to think about, oh, and that's the village name, and oh, that's this person at the village, or that's this thing going on, whatever. I didn't have to keep track of all the little details because she gave us just enough that our brain could absorb without having to work too hard.
Yeah, and like I can't remember for the life of me the name of his village. But in my head, like I can imagine what the tea house looked like, and I can imagine what the city that he lived in looked like, but I don't know that there was a name to it. Or if there was, like it didn't imprint on me.
So, page 4, the city of Jiaoshan. So I've been told was once nothing more than a few straw huts built around the circumference of a large lake. The more people who gathered to call it home, the more they took from the water. And even the description goes into the history and storytelling of how that city became. And it goes on, but it's got just enough. It's laced in history. It's laced in story without it becoming over-explaining.
Yeah, I don't need to know all of the details about how the village looks, but to know the history of it and how the density of the people and how they use their water source and things like that creates imagery in my head that's almost stronger than a full description would be.
I'm going to rein us back in because I said, hey, let's talk about the magic system. And then we got distracted because we got into description. And something that I really appreciate that was done very early is setting up the cultural perspective of magic. So our main character, Sai, he's a thread seeker. He can see magic. He obviously knows magic exists. He can see a red thread or a black thread if the loved one has died on every person he meets. He sees this whole web. It's described. But on page 5, he's going through the crowd helping someone find their mates. And you hear the voices around him go, that's the thread seeker who? He looks like a drifter, like questioning. So it's not, oh, this is someone who's a celebrated and, okay, magic exists and we all believe it. It's like, no, that guy's probably a quack and he's taken that poor girl's money. So you know immediately the amount of knowledge the world has and acceptance of magic super early on.
Even when he goes to the doctor and he gets the dragon scale medicine, it's like he even has a thread of doubt there. Even
Dragons don't exist.
Exactly. Dragons don't exist. I know that magic exists because I see these red threads of fate, but dragons, are you kidding me? That's crazy. So even with people who believe in magic, and then there was like the shamans, and you could almost see that there's these layers of different types of magic and not different people didn't necessarily all get on board with everything.
I found it interesting. So this is a little bit magic system and culture in talking about when they would swear, it would be, you know, curse the gods, oh gods, and capital G gods. So like gods were part of the culture and world building, and there was praying to gods. And then there was, you know, lower tier, the dragons and magical beasts, which the magical beasts are magical beasts, but they're not gods, lowercase g. But the dragons and even the emperor, to a degree, were considered lowercase g gods. So there was the dragons, the fae beasts, the shamans, and then there was also monks. Like there was a monk temple where they used talismans to sink an entire library underground, right? To hide it away. I don't know whether those talismans and the shamans and the monks, is that the same tier? Would they use the same magic, or are those two different kinds of magic?
And they were in different regions of the world, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's almost like, is this that form of magic taking place in another part of the world, or is it a completely different level of magic? And she didn't specify, but it also worked. Like you knew that there was all of these elements, and it left me wanting more. I definitely could have read more about, you know, I could read a whole nother book set in the same world to learn more about the monks in the library, for example, that you mentioned. We were only in that library for a very short period of time. And I was like, ooh, this is so interesting. Why did the library get sunk? And what are on all these scrolls? I mean, of course, book lovers love books about libraries and magic libraries. So to just get a taste of it, I thought was so well done, because it was like, oh, I love this part.
Me more.
Through, and he really wants more of the books. He's like, oh my God, all these scrolls that we're passing by, what could be on these ancient scrolls? What's all this magic or knowledge and histories? He was really into histories and stories. And he was like regretting having to leave them behind and not getting to sit and delve into that. It just has how I was feeling. And I also thought that the idea of reincarnation was brought in as part of the magic. And to me, that it wasn't clarified if everybody in the world reincarnated. If it was, I mean, it's specifically with Sai and Jin, we know that they reincarnated. And that was talked about. But we didn't know, for example, when Fang died, was she going to come back? You know,
it would have been everybody, because the initial story that is told on the tapestry in the library is one of the monks is standing on the stairs that can go either way, where you can choose to continue up the stairs and go on to whatever's next in the afterlife, or you go down the stairs back to Earth and you reincarnate. And you have that choice. So to me, that's an option to everyone. And Sai makes a point of, over the 700 lifetimes that he has, always choosing to go down the stairs to get back to Jin. And getting into a little bit of the deeper part, the strength and the optimism that you have to have as a character to keep choosing that, even if your memory gets wiped in every lifetime. Like the Emperor Rong spends all of his time as an immortal hunting him down and killing him in some way, almost all of his lives, and tragically, except for maybe, so here was one. There was one life that is talked about. God, the page where Sai comes back as a girl, is considered a pretty girl in a well-to-do family, and Jin never comes for him, so he gets married to another political family. It says he has like a bunch of kids in that life and then dies of old age. And I'm like, so there's descendants that are like half dragon out there somewhere, right? There's a whole story potential to bleed off of, I'm descended from that potential lifetime.
No, I'm glad you brought that piece up about his reincarnated lives, because I loved when he started to remember. I don't have the page marked, but when he started to remember, and he remembered like coming back as a stillborn fox cub, I believe, was one of the lives where he came back and he didn't even fully get birthed into the world. And there's just like with my human,
his 50th life.
In my human focus, I of course think, he's going to come back as a human every time. But no, he comes back as a fae beast, and he comes back as an animal, and he comes back as a girl, and he comes back as a boy, and he has all of these different experiences. And obviously we don't dive into all 700 lifetimes that he goes through. But I really loved the brief look at what that experience of reincarnation looked like and how many different paths you might take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that felt very relevant to coming back to Katrina's representation of the culture. I think that was really, really good. And I loved how she set a precedent for Sai to be a storyteller, so that when she was giving descriptions and things like that, some backstory to his past lives, or even explaining the tapestries in the library or anything like that, it came through as Sai telling or interpreting these stories, so that they never felt bulky. Because, I mean, even the mention of how many past lives that you guys just mentioned sounds like so much, but it felt right. It felt easy to read. It didn't take me out of the story, when so often I would be taken out of the story by that much backstory, but I wasn't, because it felt right to the character.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at it now, and it's only a couple of pages, and a lot of it is her writing style, how she's able to impress these ideas onto the reader with just a few words. And like, she gives you the feeling of it without having to go greatly in depth.
Again, this is going back to structure. So the first time he is reborn, the red dragon returns in the form of a pauper's son. So it immediately sets up that the first life, immediately after dying that first time, comes back same gender as human, and he mistakes the memories of his past life for nothing more than the most vivid of dreams. So like those memories are super close and super vivid. And I felt that was such a great setup and hint for when, major spoiler, Jin dies and comes back, and she comes back as human, as the same gender, still a girl, and that her past life's memories are so close that at that, climactic end where Sai takes her up on his back in dragon form, she's able to, with the experience of flight, find her dragon form again. And they can, I was like, if they don't end this book as two dragons flying together, I will throw the book. But I did not have to, because they did, and it was lovely. But even just seeing, okay, that structure, that foreshadowing here makes that feel right, and not like, oh, well, why didn't she just reincarnate as a bug the next time? Like, what makes you think that it's going to be the next life will be? And Sai was prepared for it not to be human, for it to be just whatever form she was going to come in, he was going to find her.
Yeah, and I loved how they, like, when he came back as a Fae beast, then they and the dragon, like, spent time in that life together in those forms, and this idea of acceptance of your soulmate no matter how they are reborn. I really love that feeling.
Yeah. It gives me an extra soft spot for whenever I see stories in the zoo where animals that are like, here's a fox and a goose that are best friends, or here's, that's not normal, but they are. And it's weird and wonderful on such an extra level because of that, the human interpretation of acceptance of who the other person is in the soul and the comfort they bring and the connection that you have mattering more than what food you eat or what shape you're in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at first, I don't always love meant to be soulmates as a plot device, because I feel like it can take away in books, not necessarily in this one, but in general in books. I feel like it kind of gives the author a little bit of an easy out of being like, well, now these two people love each other and we just know that they love each other because they're mated or they're soulmates. And we don't have to do the work as the writer to create a relationship between these two people. Oh, I feel the mating bond click in and I know you're the one for me. So I was loving Sai as a protagonist, and then that started to come in and I got a little worried. But then as the idea of the reincarnation happened and Jin's feeling of being really sad and keeping him at a distance because of all of the hurt that she'd experienced through all the lifetimes, and then of course her big betrayal that she had very recently gone through with him, it started to really grow on me. And I really loved, you do have all of this. It's not just that this mating bond clicks in and I love you no matter what. It's that you actually have all of these many, many years of experience and life together. And it's just, for Sai, it wasn't something that he could remember. He felt it inside him, but he didn't have it in his mind. Whereas she did. She remembered all of those times. I kept kind of wanting a little bit of her perspective, just to feel what that would feel like. But I actually think it really worked well not to have that and just to see it through his perspective of him struggling to understand why she was keeping him at such a distance.
Definitely.
They're dynamic. There's a reverse grumpy sunshine, right? Because Jin is the grumpy one and Sai is absolutely sunshine. And if we had gotten her perspective, because she has gone through and remembers the 7,000 years of lifetime trauma, like that would change the tone of the book to have that in there. So I fully agree with the choice not to include that, because that tonal change would have affected the kind of story that was, the lightness and the hope and the ultimate message of it being a story of love and devotion. Because also Jin struggled with self-harm. That was a part. It broke her in ways that I don't think in this amount of pages.
Yeah, you couldn't do justice to that depth of emotion.
Not as a glimpse. Not unless the whole book was from her perspective. And then that's a different story because it's her story, not Sai's story.
I kept thinking I knew what was happening. I kept thinking like, okay, I I think she's the dragon. I think that she has seen him die and come back. I kept getting glimpses of what it might be, but I didn't know the whole picture. And that's why I wanted some of her perspective, was to see how she was going through it. But then I 100% agree it would have totally changed the story to include her. But I did feel like at the very end, after she dies and Saya's waiting, you don't fully get the feeling of what she went through, but you get a little hint that he's prepared to wait as long as it takes. They're very lucky that they didn't have to wait that long, like 20 years. So not so bad. Appreciate it. And it would be so grim to go through her perspective of all of those lifetimes. And that was not the book I was signing up to read.
Yeah, that is not what this cover promises. That would be an entirely different color palette, is that kind of promise. I want to touch on the plot twists. At what point, because when you read the back of this story, it does not at any point say or hint at reincarnation. That is saved as a twist in the plot, in any of the marketing, until someone outside of the marketing plan, like if you get a TikTok or something, like they might include, Fate and Mate's reincarnation as their little on screen, here's what's in this book. But just reading the back, like the promise on the back of the book happened all in the first 30 or 50 pages. Like I marked it because I was like, we've gotten to this point and now it's a completely different story than what the premise set up. Oh, he owns a tea shop. Oh, he's going to go find dragon scales. Well, he finds the dragon in the first 50, because that's his fated one. So that part of the premise delivered. What is the whole rest of this book about? If we've already met the dragon, we've already met the fated one, where's the rest of the plot? Which there was plot. I just didn't know what it was.
We're 25% of the way through and they've already met each other and figured out that they're fated. I thought that would be the end of the book.
Mm-hmm. Tough romance, though, if it's you're getting through 200 pages of not together and then they see each other and it's, oh, you're my fated one. That's the kind of story I don't like, because then that's, oh, here's your insta love. You didn't both work for it.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have felt as satisfying to me as this, where they get to meet, they get to interact, and Sai gets to fall in love with her, this version of her, pre-getting his other memories back.
Yeah.
I don't know that I believe in love at first sight necessarily, but I do believe in home at first experience, because I have experienced that. When I met my husband, not my husband at the time, but when he was a complete stranger to me, I met him, and by the end of the day, I absolutely knew that he was going to be part of my life and that he felt like a person who was home to me. And it was so bizarre. So seeing your fated one, the experience that is described here, where just you see them and you feel that I've felt, okay, yes, that exists. I do recognize that my experience with that is rare, but I understood it and I felt like it was written well in this story.
Like Sage, I'm not a huge fated mates tropey kind of person. But this one, I think, did it very well, because Katrina showed these characters falling in love over and over and choosing the love over and over, being reborn over and over, and fighting for each other. So they didn't lose the part for me that is so attractive, is people choosing each other and going through things in order to choose each other. And instead made it part of the fate that you get to still choose it. And that's something with the reincarnation magic. Actually, this choice part I thought was so well done and well represented, because as long as your thread exists, then there's still potential that your fated one will return or something like that. But if it's black, they're past and they have the potential for a future life, but unfortunately you won't reconnect with that particular mate again. And then if it's red, they're out there somewhere and you always have the potential of meeting them. And then if it's gray, something has gone down between you and the relationship potential has been blocked off. So it's not chosen anymore, at least in that lifetime. I thought that was a really fascinating way of very visually representing that to us as the readers, whether or not the characters have chosen it or will choose that. It teased us with Jin, where she started to let down her walls a little bit, and the string started to change colors. And Sai was like, yes, yes, yes. And she was like, no, absolutely not.
Ball. Can't.
Turn around, face the other direction.
Yep.
I can't soften. I'll just get hurt again.
Early on, I think it's page 95, there was something about finding that person. And he says, please, I rasp, I think you're my fated one. I know I am, she says. Her green eyes are cold. Now leave me the fuck alone. And I loved that because it was like, oh, this is not going to be as easy. Just because you're fated, just because you're on the other end of the thread doesn't mean like, okay, and now happily ever after. It was like, oh, we have to work for it. Do we even want it? Like you were saying, Catherine, like making that choice. And Sai goes through a lot before Jin starts to let down her walls and let him in. And he really struggles for it.
Going back to you reading from page 95, I think you're my fated one. I love authors who do this full circle structure. Page 306, it's, I think you're my fated one. She says, I grin so wide that my cheeks ache. I know I am. Now, if you'll drink your tea, I would share with you a story. And that's so the Grumpy Sunshine aspect. And it's the reverse are saying those lines. And I was like, oh, this is my kick my feet, happy giggle. Just flipping those, mirroring them, and then both getting to say it. And it being so, fuck off being Jin's character. And here, drink your tea being, and I'll share a story with you, being Sai's character that epitomized them.
I adored that.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I liked is as Sai traveled, he would come across people who, he could see all their threads, and he would come across people who didn't marry their fated one and still had happy lives. And I thought it was a nice, like a nice minor detail, right? Like you didn't have to meet your fated one in order to have a full life. And then there was other times where you did have people that had married their fated one, were living happily.
All right. For you, how soon in the book did you figure out that Sai was the red dragon?
Ooh.
How long did that take you?
I think I figured it out when they were looking at the tapestries and stuff.
So when he's figuring it out.
Yeah.
I read the back of the book. I thought that his fated one was going to be a dragon. And I thought that he was going to eat a dragon scale. I didn't realize that the dragon scale medicine was for his mom. I thought that his fated one would be a dragon. Once we realized that she was a dragon, I was like, well, he's got to be a dragon too then. Because
I think that was
how could have this?
Yeah. I think the author did really well with foreshadowing the fact that he was a dragon, that he wasn't just human. But I don't think I realized that he was like the red dragon, king of the lands, until they were going and looking at the tapestries. And he was like, wait, where did this dragon go? What happened?
What about you, Zinzi?
I knew he was going to end up being the red dragon. Page 44. The shaman says, a violent end you shall meet, your final breath drawn in the arms of his red majesty. And that's because the guard dies in Sai's arms.
Right.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, we're talking reincarnation. We've got the red dragon. Then the green dragon is the fated mate. But what the author got me on is because the emperor showed up with a blue dragon on his robe, I thought he was the blue dragon. I thought he was the sun that had gone amiss, not that he had consumed the sun and that he was the fated one who'd gone evil. But then I spent the rest of the book looking at a broken sun, a lover shunned, the shaman rasps, 3, now 2, soon to be 1. And I went, okay, who's going to be the final one standing? Is Sai going to die yet again at the end? And then poor Jin will just have to wait for him to show. And I love that it was a reversal where, at the end, Sai goes, I am the last dragon of the East.
I loved that.
Yeah.
That was a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really nice for Jin, too, because by being reborn, she got to shed, I think, a little bit of the weight of that really long lifetime that she waited.
Yeah.
And though she regained her, it doesn't specify how much of her memories or how strong her memories are. She regains. At the end, she does regain her memories. She remembers him. She remembers being a dragon. But I like the feeling that there is maybe enough of an emotional distance there that she didn't have to carry all of that heaviness with her, and she had it was a rebirth. She had a chance at happiness. Whereas even if they had managed to defeat the Emperor without her dying as the Green Dragon, she would have still carried that with her.
Yeah, particularly that the really difficult betrayal of attempting to kill Sai to break the connection, to break the cycle, and not being able to go through with it. To have maybe a cloud or feeling like that's a far away memory instead of so present.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's okay. And she kind of got a new chance at it. So, Zinzi, maybe you remember better than I did about this, but when I had a little pet peeve in the character development, which was that when Sai started to bring on his dragon form, it was through anger, and his eyes turned red and he got really angry. And I didn't feel like there was any hint at all to anger being a part of his character when he was younger or in any part of the earlier part of the book. I didn't feel like he had anger inside of him. And I almost wanted like a little flash of that early on, like if something didn't work at the tea house, a little, because he was so charming and so happy and he was the sunshine. And I really enjoyed him as a protagonist. But when the anger started to come out, I was like, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't he be the dragon that turns through happiness? Right? I think that was the sun that used happiness.
That was, and then he couldn't escape because he couldn't transform. And then the heart gets eaten. It did feel a little incongruous that there wasn't a stronger connection to anger, but I also thought that Sai did have it if you can think about it as righteous anger, because he throws himself into saving the girl who's being harassed at the beginning by the soldiers and, tries to rescue her and pull her away. He throws himself in and gets mauled when there's a fated couple. They had found their fated ones and they were together, and he goes in and tries to defend them again from the soldiers. So there is that, if it's like that righteous anger, that protectiveness.
Okay.
That's what made the connection for me if it's righteous anger. And also the King Dragon, the Majesty, like that fearsomeness and that level of intensity of power doesn't necessarily even always have to be anger, but that strength being rooted in protection. I'm protecting my kingdom. This is mine. Like, even if it's an unhealthy, because this is mine, protectiveness or possessiveness.
He had that with his mother in the tea house also, where he was very protective of her, working really hard to try and figure out how to keep her healthy, not eating meals so that she could eat when they were low on money, kind of thing.
Yep.
With Sai, he has the internals that he fights off about how shameful and how angry that makes him want to be, and how he chooses to like let it go and let it be. And I think they used his mom as the reason he was letting those things go, because he didn't want any harm to come back to her. So I can see how anger was his trigger. I do wonder if it wouldn't have been better to label it as protectiveness or something. Not that anger can't be out of protectiveness, but yeah. Or maybe it is perfect as anger, because then that also encompasses the negative side of that. So there are pros and cons, and Jin definitely teased to the side that his anger could be bad sometimes.
It also could be that after so many lifetimes of rebirth, his memory of that dragon power had faded until he met her. He was protective of the strange girl and his parents, but it wasn't until his life was being threatened very physically, and then Jin's life as well, that anger started to really come out. So maybe it was just that he was far enough removed from that dragon lifestyle as his little tea house self.
Well, his first life, like he dies, he comes back, but he dies as a child. He makes it to 5 years old before he dies of the plague. And the Emperor has dragon scales to heal people and chooses to let them die on purpose.
He was a good villain, I thought.
Yeah.
He was a good villain. I found it interesting that he tried to be manipulative at the end. Like, if I have enough dragon blood, I can bring your son back. Like, he'd lived long enough to have regretted killing his fated one and then consuming him, even though at no point did he give up the power that came with that decision. He just wanted everything. He wanted that power, and he wanted to not be alone.
Yeah, so he was haunted, but not haunted enough to make genuine changes to his lifestyle.
Yeah.
In fact, he used the life that he had gained through eating his former lover in order to justify the crimes he was doing, finding the dragons and everything, so he could bring that lover back. Like, he's like, oh, yeah, but if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be able to do this now.
I really liked his story, and the story of the son was told, even though you didn't know who it was about, but like, so you had Sai telling stories and talking about histories, but then you also had these little interludes where it told the story of the emperor and the blue dragon slowly in little snippets. And I liked how that kind of reinforced the idea of the mythologies and the storytelling without being too heavy-handed. It would have not made sense if Sai had known all of those things or just happened to find them on tapestries, so it needed to be brought in. But I thought it was well done to where it gave enough. It kind of like gave little hints that there was something else going on. That I didn't realize it would be the emperor until pretty late in those little interludes, but I started to see that he was taking on more and more power, and it made me wonder because the emperor was such a person of like wanting total power.
Yep. He'd conquered all the surrounding lands and done it badly in a way where he then has the land, but he's not protecting it anymore. He's not caring for it. It's not healthy. All right. I have a compliment sandwich. I love the structure of the story. I love the full circle moments. That was fabulous. My complaint is I could not figure out the timeline. Was Sai and Jin together? Did this adventure happen over a month? Did it happen over 3 months? Is this 2 weeks? Like the sense of time was not well described. And that's a pet peeve of mine where I'm like, I need to know how long these characters have been together. I will say, though, this story, so much of this that's an adventure story, akin to, it makes me think of The Mummy, where it's just like there's thing happening moment after moment after moment. Nobody's really taking a breath or resting or relaxing for more than a sentence on the page, which is good because then it meant, any misunderstandings could stay misunderstandings for as long as they needed to be for the point of the plot. But it just you need time to rest. You need time. And I need to know how much time has passed in a story when people fall in love. That said, I really loved the dynamic, the grumpy sunshine. I loved having a love story told. Like, this is from a guy's perspective, which is not the norm in romantic fantasies. This is a romantasy in particular because it's about their romance. So that also I really enjoyed and felt was really refreshing, is to get the guy's perspective with that kind of story instead of it being yet another ingenue young woman. And he's 25. Like, they're grown-ups in this lifetime. I mean, then lots of other lifetimes.
Okay, I have a comment on the timeline thing, though. Did not mind the quicker pace, but I am with you when it comes to romances. I get really skeptical when people fall in love over the course of, say, a week or 3 days. They're like, all of a sudden, you're my it forever. I'm like, have you ever met a real person? But that said, I do think that the author gave me just enough timeline that I felt okay with it. And also because of all the backstory, it was clear that there was prior relationship material between them that added to the dynamics.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel too weird about it in the end.
So I actually have an answer to the timeline on chapter 43, page 291.
Nice.
It's after he's transformed and after the emperor has been slain. Sai says, it's strange coming home again after a whole moon away. So it's about a month, which feels like a short time frame for everything that happened, because he did travel like across the lands all the way to the islands and then got brought back somehow by the emperor and all right, and then he returned to his village from the Winter Palace. So I don't know how long the travel from the Winter Palace back home after Jin died took. But so if maybe that took a few days or a week, then they were together for 3 weeks or so. One of the elements that wasn't working for me at first, as I was really enjoying it and I was loving Sai as a protagonist, and I really liked a perspective from a man, which is more unusual in this genre, but I felt like I wanted more like emotional. He was Sunshine. Grumpy Sunshine is not my favorite also, I think because Sunshines often kind of bug me.
Same.
So but I was really enjoying him as a character, but then I wanted him to have like more emotional depth. And I realized maybe like 2/3 of the way through the book that he was playing the role more, his role was more like a flat arc. Like he did have a transformation where he remembered being the Red Dragon and transformed into the Red Dragon, but he actually had more effect on the world around him. And the actions that he took affected the lives of everybody else around him. So he didn't go through that much character change. Yes, he remembered his past life. Yes, he found his fated one and righted the wrongs from the past. But he didn't like make a huge transformation for himself other than becoming the Red Dragon and tapping into that magic. But he was kind of the same person, right? He didn't have like this terrible thing that had to be
this. It went.
Yeah, it was a straight arc, but he affected the lives of everyone around him. The entire realm was affected positively by his actions, right? Because he stopped the Emperor, and hopefully that meant that the lives of everyone in the realm were positively changed through the course of that adventure that he took on. So once I kind of realized that was what was going on, I was like fully on board with it. At first, I was really worried about the revelation of all of the past lives. So I thought the author did a good job of like all of the concerns that I kind of had, maybe after like a third of the way into the first third, I was loving it. And then about a third of the way in, I was like, I don't know about this aspect. I don't know about that aspect. But she kind of resolved all of those and made me very happy by the end of it.
Do you feel like if at the start of the book, Sai had been shown as an impatient person, and then at the end, because he has to choose to wait for Jin, that would have been like a nice little personality change.
That's a good one. I like that. Or if he was so passive when the story began. And I do think that at the end, he was a lot more active, but he was choosing patience as opposed to just passively letting life go on around him. So, yeah, I do think that there could have been more fault to the character. And we did bring up his anger thing, and maybe at some point in one of his lifelines that was a fault. But in this particular one, it definitely wasn't. So maybe there could have been a little bit more character development, because I also think Jin was very flat too. I do think that she kind of had a coming back to herself kind of moment, but it wasn't much of an arc. She didn't change much of herself, unless you guys would think that her drowning Sai earlier in this lifeline, if that was the break in her character development line. She never fix it necessarily, but they definitely like let it go, let it be, accepted it.
I think she had development after going through the tragedy of being stuck in the cycle, contemplated self-harm, had harmed herself, had thought about, okay, if I die, I'm too much of a coward to die. But if I do die, I'm going to go up the steps. I'm not going to keep this cycle going. It's too awful. And I think she had some character growth by the end of the story where Sai has demonstrated, because he keeps choosing her, that it would be worthwhile for her then, if she does die, to go down the steps and come back and choose him too. Because she spends most of the book not choosing him, right? Like, she's done the lifetimes where she did, it was awful, bad things happened because the Emperor, and now finally she's getting to a point where, no, I'm going to keep going for us being together as much as I can.
It's like she had shielded her heart, and she broke through that.
And I will finish off this is what I loved with, I have a quote here that I highlighted that I felt like this is the core line of this book. My love for this dragon transcends lifetimes, transcends our corporeal forms. I would choose her for all eternity over a seat in heaven.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
So next month on our book club, we are going to be reading For She Is Wrath by Emily Varga. So go ahead and pick that up now, start reading so you can join us for our next book club without worrying about spoilers.
Our next episode, the topic we'll be covering, did marketing make you read it? What motivates your book choices?
Those are separate episodes, right?
No, that's all in one. That's one episode where we're gonna. That's what we're gonna talk about. That's the whole thing.
Okay. Can't wait to see you there.
You will find links to the book that we just read in our show notes. You can find us on TikTok. We are on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We look forward to chatting again, and thank you so much for tuning in. That was such a panic. It's the end. But it'll be good. Hey, we're learning as we're going. Enjoy the ride with us. It's funnier when we screw up.
Yeah.
So stick around for that. I've got Welcome to Book Dragon Banter, a podcast where, oh gosh, I am too far away from reading my stupid Post-it notes. I'm really angry.
Okie dokie. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here today. We are getting ready to chat about... Okay. Why am I doing the intro today? My brain.
All right. Spoiler-free recommendations. Sorry, guys. My robot processing noises. I swear I'm not a bot. I would say if you like legends and latais, there's with words.
I'm sorry, my cats. So they've been playing around my feet this whole time, you guys. Is that the only thing that Sage has had trouble with?
I had said I'm panicking internally the entire time.
I'll just have to add that layer where it's blue screen or green screen where you're associating. Here's a little, just the little words will show up above Sage's head.
I'm
association
completely
moment.
disassociating because I'm a Enneagram 9. I don't know if any of you go into Enneagram very much, but I'm a 9, and our key way of dealing with fear is to disassociate. 100%. Okay. I think you should end every episode saying, panic, it's the end.
That was cute.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Oh, panic.